Great British Giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Good evening, it's me again. I'm Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man Nigel Farage. On Farage tonight, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, has said that the Tories got it wrong, you don't say, when it came to reducing immigration, going as far to blame it on Brexit. And the Shadow Immigration Secretary also committed to a hard cap on immigration, but are his words as useless as a screen door on a submarine? And the Business Secretary has called today a dark day for Luton after Vauxhall announced it would be closing down its historic factory, costing up to 1,100 jobs. Yet the government has doubled down on its commitment to phase out petrol and diesel cars by 2030, a policy, remember, brought in by the Conservatives. But should they consider U-turning on this net zero policy? Plus, Labour continue to bite the hand that feeds them. Today, farmers gathered in Dover to call for a government U-turn on its controversial inheritance tax plan raids. I'll be joined by one of those protesters later on in the programme. Now, all of that to come and much more. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. These are your headlines. Labour have no serious plan for ending illegal migration. That's a message from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, who says we can no longer be naive. Giving a speech a short while ago, she said the Conservatives are to thank for a reduction in net immigration expected to be confirmed tomorrow. The Tory leader laid out her 5-point plan for tackling immigration while admitting her party got it wrong in the past.
People know that if they can make it to the UK, they will be able to stay. We must end that. The result of Labour's policies will be consistently high illegal immigration throughout this Parliament and insufficient action on legal migration. But we are not in government now. We are the opposition, and our role now is to hold the government to account.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has ruled out calling another general election after a petition calling for a rerun garnered over 2.8 million signatures. The petition on Parliament's website calling for another election has become the third most popular e-petition since 2010, easily surpassing the 100,000 signatures required for a debate to take place. While the vast majority of those signing it are from the UK, it has also gained support from other countries. Donald Trump ally Elon Musk used his ex-social media site to highlight a petition calling for another election and branding the UK a tyrannical police state. Downing Street sources have told GB News that the government is not considering a blasphemy law. It comes after Sir Keir Starmer faced questions from MPs in the House of Commons today, where he was urged to introduce blasphemy laws by Labour MP Tahir Ali. Mr Ali called for action as he warned division and hatred can be fuelled in society by such mindless desecration. Blasphemy laws were abolished in England and Wales in 2008 and in Scotland in 2021. In other news, several people nominated to roles in Donald Trump's incoming cabinet and administration have been targeted by bomb threats and swatting, according to the FBI. Police are investigating the incidents, which happened on Tuesday night and early this morning. Caroline Levitt, a spokeswoman for Trump's transition team, said several people had been targeted and law enforcement acted quickly to ensure their safety. Thousands of displaced Lebanese residents in the south are returning home after a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah came into effect. However, Israel's warning people not to return until its forces have withdrawn from certain areas, which could take up to 2 months. Here, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says the ceasefire is long overdue, calling for a political solution to end the crisis permanently. Meanwhile, aid organisations are calling for the truce to extend to Gaza, where fighting continues. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, loads to get our teeth into, so let's get started tonight. And let's begin here. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, says that Labour have no serious plan for ending illegal migration. Well, neither did the Tories, right? But this comes as she gave a speech earlier on today on immigration, admitting that the party made mistakes on this pressing matter.
People know that if they can make it to the UK, they will be able to stay. We must end that. The result of Labour's policies will be consistently high illegal immigration throughout this Parliament and insufficient action on legal migration. But we are not in government now. We are the opposition, and our role now is to hold the government to account.
Well, tough talking today, an awakening almost. But let's remind ourselves what Ms Badenoch said in 2018 when she asked for immigration caps to be removed.
As a first-generation immigrant, can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, which I feel this immigration white paper is a move from the 20th century to a much better future immigration system. In particular, I'd like to thank the Home Secretary for removing the annual limits on work visas and also on international students, both of which I lobbied for on behalf of the Wellcome Sanger Institute and Anglia Ruskin University, which serve my constituency. Could he elaborate on how removing the work visa cap in particular will give business certainty?
And there we go, more positions in the Kama Sutra. There's always a video. There's always evidence to dig out and discuss this. I'm joined now in the studio by my magnificent panel as the former Chancellor of the Exchequer and Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio. Let's just go through a few of the points. I watched this speech earlier on. I was astonished. But look, let's go through what the solutions are. Number one, a review of the ECHR and the Human Rights Act. A review, not an actual action to leave. Two, strict numerical caps on immigration. Chris Hope asked for a number. There wasn't a figure. There was a framework. Three, fully transparent costs on benefits and housing. What's this costing the country? Four, zero tolerance for foreign criminals with a view to deporting them if necessary. And point five, to review the data on accessing to benefits. Kwasi Kwarteng, all of this could have been done in the past 14 years. Isn't it a bit rich to suddenly talk tough? Now you're facing down the barrel of just being in the wilderness for years.
But what are you meant to do as an opposition? You've made mistakes in government. But the fact that you made mistakes in government doesn't mean you just say you stay silent when the government are messing things up. You know, as she said, you've got to hold the government to account. And it doesn't make sense to say, well, we made mistakes, so we're not going to say anything. And what she's saying is quite interesting. I think with the ECHR, I think she has gone a bit soft. I think Robert Jenrick had a very clear line, and he was going to leave it. I think she sort of tacked, in a way, slightly to the left of Robert in the campaign. And I think a lot of
MPs... She campaigned to remove immigration caps in 2018. What's changed?
Well, a lot's changed because we've had record immigration since 2018. And actually what she said was the visas... Yeah. If you look at what she said, it was about visas for students. And that was something which was very specific to her constituency. She mentioned her constituency.
Oh, come on. She said work visas and visas for students.
And visas for students. And that's important.
And that's nationwide. She's not suggesting that we should... there are basically only tourist visas, work visas and student visas, basically. Yeah. I mean, they're the broad categories. No one really talks about wanting to limit tourist visas because they bring lots of... dollars into the market.
That's fair.
So the only thing that anyone's talking about now is putting caps on work visas. We had caps on work visas. Many of us, including myself, at the time said a points-based system, which is what we moved to, that had no caps, would increase immigration, because that's what happened when Australia introduced a points-based system.
Right.
Because what you effectively do is you tell everyone, here's the target you need to meet, here's the loopholes, and if you meet them, carte blanche. Nothing about actually what the need is for the local area, nothing about what the need is for the country. That's the points-based systems are basically quasi-immigration welcome systems. We should have never had a points-based system.
We should have had
it all along.
We should have had a cap. So when I was elected in 2010...
You did have a cap. David Cameron said tens of thousands.
He said tens of thousands, but it didn't work.
It never happened.
It didn't work. And that was what, in a way, I think, among one or two other things, was a big failure of the government, and that's why we're in opposition. But now she can say, look, we got things wrong. This government is making it even worse, which they will do.
But so how is this government making it worse?
And we're going to try, because they don't have, as she said, they do not have a credible plan to reduce...
The Conservatives don't have a credible plan.
Wait a second. Let's look at...
You can't just say, well, they both messed up, so let's just give up. She's in the opposition and she's got to hold you guys to account, and that's what she's doing.
I get that. But since July, deportations have increased by over 20% from the year before, where 2,900 extra deportations have happened.
Illegal immigration has also gone up, so it's all about the
Well, actually, the small boats have not increased that much since last year. There's a few thousand extra, but it's looking like...
A few thousand extra. Wait a second. That means it's gone up.
A few thousand extra because we had good weather. In this bad weather, the number of coming over the boats has plummeted. So it probably will end the year.
That's cyclical. That's seasonal.
But
you understand that. That's seasonal.
The year is most likely to end with the same number of small boats as last year, but it will end with a 20% increase in deportations. That's Labour getting its act together in only a few months. Why couldn't the Tories have those 20% extra?
Well, a lot of the stuff, as she said, was put in at the end. A lot of that stuff was put in at the end of the Conservative administration, and that's clearly the case.
Gentlemen, let me read out. Chris Philp, his new Shadow Home Secretary, read out a number of statements which were meant to quantify the problem. They did. But it happened on the Conservative watch. Listen to this. He said 8 cities the size of Liverpool came in over the past term. They did, under the Tories. 64% think immigration is too high. That's true. The Tories did that too. 120,000 new homes need to be built each year just to cope with immigration. Just to cope. That's true. That also happened under the Conservatives. Over 1 million people cannot speak English at all in the UK. That also happened under the Conservatives. 73% in East London of children don't speak English. That also happened under the Conservatives. 68% earn less than the median wage. Therefore, they are a net drain on the taxpayer. Kwasi Kwarteng. That all happened under the Conservative government.
I'm not here to say that the Conservatives had an amazing immigration policy. I am here to defend the Conservative Party and also to sketch out why I think the Labour Party will not be an improvement. But these people aren't suddenly going to learn English.
But you can't just keep saying it'll be worse under this lot, because it was terrible under you lot.
But what are we going to do now?
Exactly.
You can bash the Tories all you like, but that's not going to actually solve the problem.
Well, shall I tell you what we should do on those 3 things that you've said? On English, the Conservatives cut almost all free English teaching in adult colleges. It was cut to the bone.
They're kids in primary schools. It doesn't matter what you did in the adult colleges.
Well, it does. You have parents that don't speak English. You have adults that don't speak English. You need to be able to, in families, have the parents speak English so the children can speak English. You need to reinvest in that. Secondly, you need to bring up the minimum wage. It is a disgrace that you can be working full-time on the minimum wage and still have to receive state benefits.
Because the entire business community has reacted with total disaster to minimum wage.
Yes, because...
This is socialism.
No, because we effectively, at the moment, we subsidize...
John Lewis, Halfords, McVitie's, Tesco's...
Who's going to pay for these adult colleges?
Who's
going to pay for these adult colleges where they're all going to learn English?
Let's be very clear. At the moment, if you're on minimum wage, the state makes up the difference of your pay because the employer is getting a subsidy.
But that's tax credits from Gordon Brown.
Yes,
it was Labour that...
And we need to move.
If we're going to bash former governments, they created this system.
We need to move, and that's what Labour's agreed to do with the new Low Pay Commission's guidelines, that we move to a situation where if you're working full-time, you are contributing to the economy and not draining the economy. Those are basic principles. Hard work, contribution, that's what Labour stands for.
When George Osborne tried to do this in 2015, I don't know whether you were in Parliament at that time, it was voted down by Labour MPs because the whole tax credit system was essentially subsidising, subsidising low-paid workers on the part of for corporates.
Osborne wanted to get rid of the and we did get rid of the tax benefit system, but he did not propose to increase the minimum wage, so people would then be in work poverty.
So,
that's not
but
good.
the minimum wage increased.
Let's get back. Let's get back.
That wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan.
And we took a ton of people out of tax.
Let's get back on point about today's immigration speech.
Yes.
Another point that leapt out was when Kemi Badenoch said this country is not a dormitory or a hotel. We must look after it, except the country is a hotel. Between £8 and £4 million a day, depending on whose figures you believe, and that's actually got worse since Labour came into power. There are 13 more hotels under Labour. They said they would end asylum hotels. So getting back to one of Kemi Badenoch's points here, this will get worse under Labour. Provably, there are more hotels. It hasn't got better. It's got worse. Why should we trust the Labour Party either?
In the peak of the Conservatives, it was 8 million. It's now 4 million.
Yeah, because where they've been moved to?
Wait a second. You are
Bassett
right.
Law, Serco, all around the country, flung to the four winds.
Labour has aimed to initially, you can't suddenly turf people out of hotels if they're here.
Well, you
the people,
could.
The people.
I mean, it's a policy choice.
Yes, and we have because there's 20% increase in deportation.
So you're arguing both ways.
But you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it irrationally, and so that means that you drive down that bill by renegotiating the contract, so they aren't just £8 million. It's only £4 million. You shut down the barge that was.
But how many houses have they hoovered up on taxpayers' bill? So they're moving them into communities, into into housing that's being hoovered up by Serco on behalf of the taxpayer, and they're still in communities. The hotel bill has gone down, but the number of people has gone up. So they're just moving the problem elsewhere, and that's true.
No, you need to do all those things. You need to bring the temporary cost down because it's too extortionate, and then what you need to do is make sure you have a quick process.
It's £6.6 billion a year.
Yes, but that's because under the Conservatives, people would languish for years, 10 years, some people, before they got an outcome of their immigration status. That pledges from Labour, and that's what we've seen already, 20% increase, is that you process people quickly, you don't then have to pay for them in the hotels, you get them out either in the community working or you get them back home.
And according to the Conservatives' own figures, 68% of them earn less than the median wage and are a drain on the economy.
Because we have people who can work on minimum wage and they aren't able to sustain themselves. That is a problem not with immigration, that is a problem with low pay.
No, but what's happening with Martin is, Martin, I should say this, is that they're moving, as you pointed out, but you didn't really address this, they're moving asylum seekers, immigrants, from hotels to social housing. And guess what that does? That means that people who've lived in areas all their lives don't get social housing. So it creates a massive squeeze on people who've been paying rates, who've been paying bills, who've been paying VAT in their local communities, and not being able to even find any accommodation.
They don't buy up social housing. What they do is they buy up housing that was right to buy it and is then on the open market. Social housing is still reserved for people in the social housing.
Hang on. What happens?
Serco doesn't buy from council.
What happens? Councils put the people into social housing.
What happens is Serco pays above the market rate, and because it's got, guess what? It's got unlimited pockets, paid for by the blooming taxpayer. And we've seen an example in Rushmore, Newham Council. It's got the second highest crime rate in all of Britain, shipping out its problem tenants to Rushmore because they're paying way above the market rate. So the taxpayer is effectively shifting this problem around the country, and the hotel bill is going down, but the number of social houses is going up.
Social housing for people who've lived here all their lives, that is going down as well. So there's a squeeze.
No, sorry. If you have a stock of social housing, council housing, which is what most people would have called it, the council allocates that, and there is a requirement that you have to have a local connection. If you are
That's not often the case.
If you are, it is always the case.
It's not always the case.
Unless you are domestic violence, for example, then you can choose to go into an area that you don't have connection with. If you are an asylum seeker, then you are paid for via the Serco contract, and it does not take up social housing, council housing directly. What it might do is compete against housing that could have been social housing.
Precisely, and it's buying housing, which then the locals got.
But the idea that it was social housing is not true.
Gentlemen, a lively start to the show, but we have to move on. Thank you very much there, Lloyd and Kwasi. Great starts to the show. Now, coming next, more lively debates, electric debate even, because electric vehicles costing jobs in Britain's car industry. Is net zero killing off our car industry? That's next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man. Now then, the owners of car maker Vauxhall have announced plans to close its company's van-making factory, sadly, in Luton, putting 1,100 jobs in grave peril. And that's just days after Ford also announced plans to cut 800 jobs at their plants. Now, the closure has been blamed on flagging electric vehicle sales and, of course, the financial penalties imposed on car companies if EV sales don't make up 22% of all sales. And don't forget, by 2030, this will rise to 80% of all sales. Now, Labour's Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds earlier on called it a dark day for Luton. But was it the punitive green targets of Labour and the Tories before them that turned off the lights and put over 1,000 people's jobs at risk? Well, let's take a listen to what the Business Secretary said earlier on today in the Commons.
Investments being made at Ellesmere Port and elsewhere demonstrate that there are real opportunities for UK manufacturing as part of the move to zero-emission vehicles. But this transition has to be properly managed, and it requires a government that's on the pitch, something the car industry finally now has in this government.
So let's see if the sparks fly in this debate. I'm joined now by Aid Thomas, the founder of the World EV Day and the Electric Vehicle Advocates, and of course my electric panel, the former Chancellor and Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moore. Great stuff. Aid, let's start with you. Not my words, the words of the owner of this plant, Stellantis. They said the Vauxhall plant and 1,100 jobs with it has been killed by net zero.
Well, let's put this in a bit of context. Stellantis Vauxhall are still investing 50 million in their Ellesmere port plant, which is their primary production site for electric vans. The plant in Luton never produced a single electric van, so it's not really entirely an electric van or electrification issue.
But the facts of the matter are, we don't seem to be that enamoured with electric vehicles, not only in Britain, but across the European Union. BMW crying out for relief from the European Union, none is forthcoming. Porsche simply stopping to make electric vehicles altogether. The same with Volkswagen, and in America it's the same. Meanwhile, the Chinese flooding the market with knockdown prices. We can't compete, and the fact of the matter is, Aid, whether you're an advocate or not, the British public simply don't want these vehicles.
Well, we're already at 20% consumers buying electric vehicles as we get towards the end of this year. There is a 22% target, so there's a little bit of a mismatch between that, and that has some pretty severe fines for the manufacturers. So that's what's concentrating their minds. But I'm absolutely sure that we will shift into this new environment of electric vehicles. They're better cars. They're better for clean air. They're better for the climate. They're better in terms of cost of ownership over the lifetime of the vehicle. They're better to drive. They're just better all round. And sooner or later, consumers will, as soon as they start to drive them en masse, come to that realisation.
No disrespect. Back in the real world, people worry about the range. They worry about the cost. They worry about the fact they can't blooming well plug them in anywhere. If they can, oftentimes it's much more expensive. And if you don't have off-street charging of your own, many people don't, particularly poorer people might live in terrace housing, they're paying through the nose to the point where it's the same cost as a petrol vehicle, which, by the way, you can fill up in moments and won't ever let you down. People don't want these things, and they don't want to be forced into it by governments who are just going to punish them for it in the first place.
With all due respect, those are some tropes that are continually trotted out by conservative media. In the real world, 60% of people have access to off-street parking, to a charge point at home, which is really, really low-cost way of charging a vehicle.
So why are these cars flying out the showrooms then?
As I say, there's a bit of friction at the moment as we enter the early mainstream audience. There's a bit more work, I think, that everyone needs to do across the whole sector to communicate all the benefits of EVs. The media this year has been doing a terrible job of portraying them in a very negative way, and that needs to be counteracted by some really positive messaging about how great EVs are. So that's what my role is.
Well, go on, convince me to buy it. I've got a diesel car. I have to pay 12.5 quid to use it every day, thanks to ULEZ, thanks to Sadiq Khan. I was incentivised to scrap my perfectly good petrol car to get a diesel car by Gordon Brown's government. I went with it. I feel mugged off. Why should I get forced to buy a vehicle again that I don't want?
Have you ever driven an electric car?
Yes, I have.
And what was your experience?
I continually worry about it running out of juice. I worry about putting the heating on. I worry about putting the radio on. I worry about being able to get to my destination.
There are, this year, as of today, there are circa 71,000 charge points, public charge points in the UK. There are 8,000 petrol forecourts. So the amount of charging coming on stream, 40% of public charging, high-speed public charging, has been installed in the last year. It's a really positive picture.
Down my street, people are fighting over lamp posts.
And that's just come back to the economics. That's a 6 billion industry, which an organisation, Charge UK, the industry body for the sector, is championing, and that's really leading to massive growth in a whole new infrastructure sector for the UK.
Well, then you're putting a brave battle there. Let's bring in my panel. Kwasi, you were scoffing along in the background there. And don't forget, by the way, that the Conservatives were hugely pushing of all this. Boris Johnson, Carrie, enamoured by net zero. And it's Conservatives that pioneered scrapping petrol cars. You got it wrong, and so the Labour Party.
No, I think that's nonsense. I don't agree with everything that Aid said. But clearly the trend is towards EVs. I remember going to the first EV I saw in my life was in Israel in 2013. And there weren't any in the UK at that point, or hardly any. Now, we've got, as Aid said, thousands. So the trend is going one way. The only thing I would say is that you've got to look at these targets in the light of actually what's happening in the world. So when we set up the targets, when we put them forward, that was in 2019. But of course, two things have happened since then. We had the COVID pandemic, and then we had Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And both of those things have put massive pressure on inflation, on the cost of living. And I think what Rishi Sunak did was right. I think we've got to look at the pace of the rollout. But the trend and direction is very clear. And I think Aid is right. I think we'll have more EVs in 5-10 years' time than we have today.
Will we?
Just as we had zero 10 years ago.
Yeah,
zero.
but the take-up has largely been with fleets, public sector. If you look at the NHS, then you get them on like very, very low finance. You can plug them in the car park.
I don't think that's quite right.
Are what's driving this with taxpayers.
A lot of individuals.
Meanwhile, the private users, they're simply not going for them, Lloyd, and like it or not, the Labour Party seems to be absolutely tied to this policy, and a lot of people are thinking it's making us poorer, it's giving us less choice, and if we don't agree with it, we just get fined.
Well, I think you misunderstand the car market. Most people buy their car second-hand from a fleet. So the fact that fleets are turning to EV, actually, in my view, not quick enough. Actually, we should be putting extra targets on fleets to go quicker, will mean that you then get a proper second-hand market of electric vehicles, which is what really most people buy their car as. Right. Most people don't buy new cars.
But people worry, Thomas, people worry, with some justification perhaps, tell me if I'm wrong, about the battery life of those second-hand cars. So if a used car is 3 or 4 years old, people continue to worry that the battery will just drain down through the lifetime of the car, and they'll be frankly sold a pup.
Right, there's some really, really good news about batteries. I mean, it's really surprising everybody in the sector. The battery life is really holding up. Batteries are retaining 90% of their charge after 5, 6, 7 years of being very heavily used. Cars with 100,000 miles of range. So you can pick up a really, really good Tesla Model S, the original car which drove the whole sector, for circa £10,000 on a channel like Auto Trader.
I think the solution to that is actually the Consumer Protection Act. Consumer Protection Act is very clear. If you buy a product and there's an expectation it should last, not just 1 or 2 years, but if the expectation is that it should last 10 years and the item doesn't last 10 years, you should be able to return it. What we need is clear clarity from the producers that if it doesn't last 10 years or 15 years or however long they expect batteries should be lasting, you can go and swap it for free. That would be a game changer, wouldn't it?
So, look, we're missing, I think, the point of the story, which is the fact that the government's targets are too severe. And
they're only 2% off them.
And they're too soon. 2030 is it's only 5.5 years away.
Yeah, but we're at 20% now, and we only need to get to 22%.
And clearly it is the case that the cost hasn't gone down enough for people to take them up enough.
Well, I
think you're right that the long-term direction is for more EVs, but the pathway perhaps needs to be looked at.
And what we need is a lot more carrot and a lot less stick, in my opinion. Thank you very much, Hey Thomas. Excellent for coming in and putting on a brave face there, and also to my panel, Lloyd and Kwasi. Excellent stuff as ever. Now, coming up next, Age UK has published a study highlighting the impacts of the winter fuel allowance cut on our pensioners. And trust me, it isn't a pretty sight. That's next.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cold one tonight, frost already starting to form and some dense patches of fog are already thickening up out there too. Storm Connell is clearing away. It was named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's bringing them some very wet and windy weather. But as it clears, high pressure's moving in, clear skies for most overnight. We've seen some thick fog through the day today across Northern Ireland, thickening up again tonight and across parts of England and Wales. We are going to see things turning misty and murky with some quite dense patches of fog by dawn. Freezing fog as well as temperatures dip quite widely below freezing. Towns and cities -1, -2, rural spots much lower than that. One place that may not see much frost, the far southwest of England, here a bit more cloud moving in, but certainly for Scotland, I say towns and cities a little below freezing, but through some sheltered glens, -7, -8, maybe -9. Not quite as cold in Northern Ireland because here we are going to have the fog. Something to bear in mind for the morning rush hour. It should be clearing through the morning as the breeze picks up. Dense patches of fog also likely northwest England, East Wales, the Midlands and parts of East Anglia and the southeast. So again, some pretty unpleasant travelling conditions through that morning rush hour. And that fog may well last actually well beyond the rush hour and linger in some spots into the afternoon. In the west, it's going to turn cloudy, a bit of patchy rain for Wales, southwest England, certainly Northern Ireland turning a bit damp as the breeze picks up here. Many parts of Scotland, northern England will be dry and bright, but still quite chilly here, 4, 5, 6 at best. In the east, where the fog sticks, we'll struggle to get much above freezing. But it is turning milder. The wind's coming up from the south on Friday. Still feeling pretty chilly, I suspect, in these eastern areas, despite some hazy sunshine. Could be some fog around again on Friday morning, and then in the west we're looking at rain coming in. Northern Ireland, western Scotland, bit of rain for Wales and southwest England too come Friday. But it is turning milder with temperatures here back into double figures. Goodbye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Dorby, standing in for the big man who's still voting in chamber. Now, a new study by Age UK has highlighted the impact of Rachel Reeves' decision to cut the winter fuel allowance for 10 million British pensioners. And the research reveals that over 3/4 of the pensioners relied on this support last year for essential energy costs like heating their homes or cooking their meals. Now, Age UK warns that these cuts could force vulnerable pensioners into extreme measures, such as staying in bed all day to keep warm, or even reducing the number of hot meals they eat. It's very, very emotional stuff. And joining me now to discuss this research in more detail is Caroline Abrahams, the charity director for Age UK. Caroline, welcome to the show. The impact of the winter fuel allowance being cut is really starting to hammer home now. Of course, we're getting a proper cold snap coming in. We saw snow, we've seen storm, but some of these figures, frankly, make me feel a mixture of heartbroken and ashamed. 77% of pensioners using their winter fuel allowance to stay warm, 24% spent it on meals. A third are saying they will find it difficult to manage without the winter fuel allowance. But it's the personal stories, Caroline, that I find so upsetting. We're hearing stories here at GB News of pensioners sleeping with their pets to keep warm, feeding their pets first rather than themselves. Tell us about the huge impact this has had and the survey that you've got.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be with you. All the things you say, very accurate description of what we found in this polling, because we'd seen some stories around, you probably have too, suggesting that lots of older people don't need their winter fuel payment. And indeed that, large numbers are using it to buy luxuries. So we wanted to dig into the truth. So we asked older people how they used their winter fuel payment last year. And as you say, 3/4 did use it to help them with their heating bills, and another quarter used it with their food bills, because of course all those prices have gone up so much, haven't they, over the last couple of years? So even people who expected, I think, to retire very comfortably have noticed in their own incomes just how much more difficult life has become. And of course, if you haven't got much to start with, then it's a really, really difficult situation. And we've just had, as you say, our first cold snap, but we're not even in December yet. So I think our worry at Age UK is what's actually going to happen over December, January, February, all of which traditionally in this country are really cold months, especially up north and in Northern Ireland, in Scotland. What are people going to do there? They're going to really struggle. And we certainly are hearing of people already who are trying to ration their energy use, turning down the heating or turning it off altogether. And they're going to put themselves at risk as a result.
And we saw here in your survey, 55% of OAPs would have to turn down or reduce the hours they use their heating at home as a consequence of this cut. 1 in 10 said they would cut down on the number of hot meals they eat. And, the last thing you want to be doing if you're vulnerable and elderly is to be cutting down the energy going in, because that's your internal furnace. That's what keeps you going. Out of 10 million British pensioners, 6 million thrust into fuel poverty as a consequence of this. Do you live in hope that this could be U-turned and turn around, or do you think we're stuck with this now?
Well, it's not too late for the Chancellor to do something about it, even though we are heading into winter. Time is rapidly running out, but she could definitely help if she chose to, and the government supported her in that. So we haven't given up. And we also noticed that, for example, Labour in Scotland has said that if it wins in the election there, in not next year, the year after, they'll reinstate it. And in Northern Ireland, the government there has decided to give every pensioner £100 towards their energy bills. Only a gesture, but I'm sure a very welcome one. So there are things that the government could do, and we haven't given up hope either for this winter or indeed for the future.
Caroline, can I quickly ask you, we were talking earlier about the huge amount of money that's being spent on things like asylum, £6.6 billion per year, and of course the net saving of the winter fuel allowance. OK, so it's a big sum of money, 1.4 million, but in the grand scheme of things, as you can see there, way less than a quarter. Do you think this was a battle that the Labour Party have chosen that was ill-advised?
Well, I have absolutely no idea what the rationale was within the upper echelons of the government, because they didn't ask us, we weren't consulted, and nor indeed really was anybody beyond a very narrow group of people, I think. But clearly the public reaction has been extremely worried. And a lot of very ordinary people just know that older people in their neck of the woods are really going to struggle this winter. And I think it was a mistake. It was clearly a political error. But most importantly of all, it's going to have bad consequences for older people. So absolutely, I hope very much that the government will change its mind, and it could.
OK, Caroline Abrahams, that's the Charity Director for Age UK. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for this excellent research that's keeping us talking about this important issue. And I'm joined now by my panel, of course. That's the former Chancellor and the Conservative MP, Kwasi Kwarteng, and the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Lloyd, I have to start with you. Do you think, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, which is a huge commodity in politics, this was just a terrible battle to choose with pensioners? We're now getting into the grist of the cold snap. The Labour Party's own data in 2017 said 4,000 pensioners could perish if the Conservatives did this. The Conservatives didn't do it. But even knowing that, Rachel Reeves pressed ahead. Do you think it would go down as a huge tactical mistake?
Well, I think everyone will suffer this winter because energy prices are going to go up. We've already seen that. And many families, whether they're pensioner or not, are going to struggle. And we need to tackle the fact that we have cold houses and we have high energy costs. Now, some of that's historic, we didn't build our nuclear programme out, we didn't focus on transforming our energy grid quick enough, and we have become a bit of a, poor man in that area. So some of those things will take then a long time to build out, because it takes a long time to build out nuclear, it takes a long time. But I do think it was a mistake the way this was done. And I think you could have done it differently. You could have rolled it into pensions themselves, just to say in the winter months you get a bit of a boost on your pension. The difference that would have made is that pensions are taxable, and so therefore you would have clawed it back from the very rich.
It would have been means tested, it would have been common sense, Kwasi Kwarteng.
So I think
first the pensions, then the farmers.
I think I know what happened, and it's important that we understand it. I think the civil servants, as they usually do, will present a suite of measures, and they probably thought the Chancellor, or even probably the Prime Minister, because I don't believe that it was Rachel Reeves who pressed the button on this. It's too sensitive politically for her to be to have her fingerprints on it.
Who would have done it?
And I think it's a Prime Minister thing. I think it would be absolute. I think he must have agreed to this because of the potential political fallout. And I've commented on this before. Their calculation is like, we've got 4 or 5 years. Let's get the tough stuff right at the beginning, and then everyone will have forgotten.
But things like the poll tax haunted the Conservatives for many years.
They did, and I don't think people are going to forget this. And it's, as you say, it's a political choice. There are ways that you could claw the money back. You could put it in pensions so that richer people... And there are stories of wealthier pensioners using the £300 to do all sorts of things that ordinary people don't do. But by hitting everybody, and the Treasury will say, well, means testing is too expensive, so let's just cut it. That would have been the advice.
Yeah.
And I think it was a political mistake because, for Rachel Reeves to go down that route, a route which no Conservative in 14 years and before, well, since it was introduced by Gordon Brown, would have done.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Lloyd, Russell Moore and Kwasi Kwarteng. Let's move on. Thanks to my panel. Now, coming up next, the farmers' fight back continues as protesters this time took to the streets of Dover. And I'll be speaking to one of them. That's next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Serving some of the most talked about food in Chelsea, executive head chef of Number 50 Cheney, Ian Smith, has created a range of menus with a hint of the homeland, using the finest British ingredients sourced by trusted suppliers. Ian Smith was head chef at Jason Atherton's Social Eating House and spent time in the kitchens of the Galvin brothers. Ian joins me now to tell more of the story. Tell me about Number 50 Cheney.
Yes, so we are a beautiful restaurant down in a corner of Chelsea on the embankment with an amazing team. And we are really pride ourselves on, being an affordable luxury that people, really are wanting to return to week in, week out.
What's the view from your restaurant?
We can see the embankment, the Thames, and Albert Bridge, which is very nice.
Very
it's actually lit up. Very romantic.
And tell me a little bit about your philosophy. I was talking there about having a touch of the homeland, British food, seasonal food.
Yes. Yeah, I think for me, great cooking is, with simplicity on finest ingredients, cooked with simplicity, and ultimately, there to be enjoyed through... Yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, it starts as a young person's business. You went into it very young, didn't you? 15?
Yes. Yeah, so I was 15. I sat in my parents' bedroom, called the Ritz, the Dorchester and Claridge's, and very luckily, a man on the end of the phone, 21 years ago, sent me on to a college course called the Specialised Chef Scholarship. 3 days later, I had a Ritz stamp letter through the post, and off me and my parents went, and luckily I got on the course.
And how old were you when you got your first responsibility, would you say?
I think the biggest responsibility in my career is today. Leading Number 50 Cheney.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, covering for the big man. Now, the farmers are refusing to give up again, as once again they fight the new inheritance tax rules brought in at the last budget. And this time, over 150 tractors, as you can see on your screens there, headed to the port of Dover to protest against the inheritance tax raid and the importing of what they have described as substandard food from overseas. Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the co-founder of the Together movement, that's Alan Miller, who's been busy at those protests today. And, of course, I'm still joined by my panel. That's the former Chancellor and Conservative MP, Kwasi Kwarteng, and the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell Moyle. Alan, welcome to the show. First of all, well done for getting Jeremy Clarkson to carry one of your Together banners. You were right in there in London, this time Dover, in London, quite gentlemanly. Queensberry rules. What was the mood like down in Dover? And do you think there could be a more militant whiff in the air?
I think the thing is, Martin, that we're seeing really diligent, brilliant backbone of British people that are fed up and furious, very professional, very well organised, very can-do. They are determined to have their voices heard. They're making that case. They're organising diligently. We've seen it in Wales as well with Gareth Wyn-Jones and others. And I think that over 150 tractors coming out around Dover, they demonstrate their capability to actually, if they want to, they could shut things down, but they also love the public and the public loves them. And I think that the message is coming through loud and clear to Rachel Reeves and the government. If they were smart, the government would say, you know what, we've listened to you, let's see if we can work this out. But I think that they're doubling down and people are being contemptuous of the farmers, and they've made a big mistake because the British public love our farmers, and we Together are saying that across business, citizens, drivers, haulage and, of course, our farmers, we're all in solidarity together on this one, right? It's about food security, it's about decency, it's about not having impositions just done, carte blanche. When you say in advance you're not going to do something before an election and then you do it, it goes to the heart of a lot of concerns in Britain right now.
And we saw pictures on screen there, perhaps we can get them back up, of the tractors going around central Dover. They're not causing obstructions, they're moving with the traffic. I understand the police were informed. So again, a show of force, as we can see on the screen there, a lot of heavy plant machinery moving about, but things are still moving. No signs yet of any of that kind of message of blockading. But, Alan Miller, go back to the year 2000. The farmers then were hammered by a fuel duty hike by the Tony Blair government. Tony Blair, the most popular Prime Minister, new Prime Minister in history at that time, something which Sir Keir Starmer could only dream of. They teamed together with the haulage workers. They blockaded ports. Soon, supermarket shelves were empty. Tony Blair suffered a 25% decrease in his popularity in 1 week. Tony Blair did a U-turn. The farmers and the haulage workers, they got a victory. With all that in mind, do you think there is appetite to escalate this, to start getting a bit more gilets jaunes?
I think, Martin, we're going to see much more action. I've said about the previous ones in Wales. We know that we're talking to people. There's going to be activity in counties and in towns and cities and coastal regions up and down the country, and people are uniting around this. There's going to be much more going on. And if people are not listened to, they should take note that there's determination and grit. These are people that every day, our farmers, much loved, they go out, they work hard, they demonstrate the virtues and the values of, you know, some traditional sense of what it means to hard grafters that are decent and they're providing food for us. Without them, we don't have food. We don't want to be in the position we're in with energy, where we're actually allegedly getting rid of our carbon footprint, paying for things to come from elsewhere. This is about the public also having our voices. We're saying it together, Martin. We're encouraging your viewers and everyone to let their MPs hear from them and say, this needs to get sorted. Let's back our farmers and get this fixed. But it's not just one other thing. It's not just this issue of inheritance tax, BPR and APR. It's a range of issues that we know are impacting and damaging them. Net zero, we've seen things coming down the line, fertiliser costs, all of these issues. So there's a range of things that need to be tackled. And I think this is an opening moment for a more populist response where people are going to see that people are uniting around this.
And they can get in touch with their MPs, of course, if they go to the Together Declaration. There's a mechanism of getting in touch with the MPs, to all of which let's bring you in now. You gentlemen here. Lloyd, let's start with you. I know I started with Lloyd last time, but let's do it again, because back to my previous point, with the pensioners, a lot of people think they simply chose the wrong target, a vulnerable group who have worked all their lives. With farmers, we depend on farmers to literally put bacon on the table for us. Why? Why have the Labour Party gone after farmers?
I think politicians in Westminster of both parties don't, for a long time, have not understand farmers and our issues in the rural economy. And I remember sitting on the Trade Committee and Trade and Agriculture Commission telling us, well, New Zealand does lamb more environmentally and cheaper, so we should just let it all come in, without any understanding of the devastation that does in terms of food security. So there is a real problem, and that was under the Conservatives. So I think there's a real problem. And I think then a lot of farmers feel that this is a straw on the camel's back kind of thing, rather than actually this is the big problem. So what they could have done, and what they should do, and they still could do this, is they could say you're 100% inheritance relief if you don't sell the farm for 7 years or 10 years. If you do sell the farm within 10 years, basically to cash out, then actually you should be paying the full rate of inheritance tax. Okay. That, to me, would actually gain more money and be more effective.
We're dancing.
So, go back in time. Back in March, there was a protest around the square out here in Westminster because the farmers were unhappy with the Conservative government at the time because they were still hammered by net zero, still hammered by all of the above, apart from this.
The big problem here is that the Labour Party went into the election and they said nothing about what they were going to do with farmers' inheritance tax. They said nothing about taking winter fuel payment from pensioners. They literally said very little about what the programme they were going to govern on. Having got in, they hammer these groups with these tax rises. There is a democratic point about this, and that's why people are very angry. I think if they'd said, look, we're going to go in and we're going to do these things, they might not have been as successful, but that would have been an honest prospectus on which to win the general election. What is very disappointing for lots of people is that they said nothing about what their plans were. And then they come in and suddenly, hey, presto, they're doing all these things, hitting these vulnerable groups. That's where a lot of the fury, I'm afraid, is coming from. And it's a specific thing about the election having happened and then a new government coming in, and the first thing they do is raise taxes.
I think it's more of a problem.
We have to move on because we have some esteemed company waiting down the line. We have Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course. It's the State of the Nation next. So, Sir Jacob, I believe you join us. What's on your menu, sir?
Well, I've got a very, very special guest who is incredibly hard to book coming on to talk about a programme called Meet the Rees-Mogg. So my wife is going to be joining me. I'm channeling my inner Ed Balls and interviewing my wife live on national television to talk about this new programme coming out on Monday. But we'll also be talking about, to start with, the very, very serious issue of assisted suicide, which is coming to the Commons on Friday, and the risks that there are associated with that.
Superb stuff. That is Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation, of course, is up next. Make sure you stay tuned for that. I want to say thank you to my panel before we go. And, of course, Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration, constantly been sticking up for farmers and during lockdowns, doing excellent work. Get in touch with them. The Together Declaration, of course, my magnificent panel, Lloyd Russell-Moore, the former Labour Party MP, and, of course, the legend Kwasi Kwarteng, thank you very much, former Chancellor of the Exchequer. Thank you very much. Hope I did a good job in Nigel's absence. I'll be back tomorrow 3 till 6. Up next, though, is Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation. But first, here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cold one tonight, frost already starting to form and some dense patches of fog are already thickening up out there too. Storm Connell is clearing away. It was named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's bringing them some very wet and windy weather. But as it clears, high pressure's moving in, clear skies for most overnight. We've seen some thick fog through the day today across Northern Ireland, thickening up again tonight and across parts of England and Wales. We are going to see things turning misty and murky with some quite dense patches of fog by dawn. Freezing fog as well as temperatures dip quite widely below freezing. Towns and cities -1, -2, rural spots much lower than that. One place that may not see much frost, the far southwest of England. Here a bit more cloud moving in, but certainly for Scotland, I say towns and cities a little below freezing, but through some sheltered glens, -7, -8, maybe -9. Not quite as cold in Northern Ireland because here we are going to have the fog. Something to bear in mind for the morning rush hour. It should be clearing through the morning as the breeze picks up. Dense patches of fog also likely northwest England, East Wales, the Midlands and parts of East Anglia and the southeast. So again, some pretty unpleasant travelling conditions through that morning rush hour. And that fog may well last actually well beyond the rush hour and linger in some spots into the afternoon. In the west, it's going to turn cloudy, a bit of patchy rain for Wales, southwest England, certainly Northern Ireland turning a bit damp as the breeze picks up here. Many parts of Scotland, northern England will be dry and bright, but still quite chilly here, 4, 5, 6 at best. In the east, where the fog sticks, we'll struggle to get much above freezing. But it is turning milder. The wind's coming up from the south on the Friday. Still feeling pretty chilly, I suspect, in these eastern areas, despite some hazy sunshine. Could be some fog around again on Friday morning, and then in the west we're looking at rain coming in. Northern Ireland, western Scotland, bit of rain for Wales and southwest England too come Friday. But it is turning milder with temperatures here back into double figures. Goodbye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. It's my last programme before the assisted suicide vote, so this evening I will explain why I believe Parliament must reject this bill. Human life is sacred. In other news, you may have heard that I have a reality television programme coming out next week, so in a State of the Nation first, I'll be interviewing my wife and star of the programme, Helena Rees-Mogg. A landmark ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah has been struck, but will this be a step towards a regional de-escalation? Plus, a new report has suggested Labour is wrong about the number of farmers set to be hit by inheritance taxes, with 75,000 farms possibly going to be hit by the changes. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most formidable panel, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood and the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop. As always, it's a crucial part of the programme. Send me your views, mailmog at gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your headlines. Labour have no serious plan for ending illegal migration. That's a message from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, who says we can no longer be naive. Giving a speech a short while ago, she said the Conservatives are to thank for a reduction in net immigration, expected to be confirmed tomorrow. The Tory leader laid out her 5-point plan for tackling immigration while admitting her party got it wrong in the past. Meanwhile, Downing Street sources have told GB News that the government is not considering a blasphemy law. It comes after Sir Keir Starmer faced questions from MPs in the House of Commons today, where he was urged to introduce blasphemy laws by Labour MP Tahir Ali. Mr Ali called for action as he warned division and hatred can be fuelled in a society by such mindless desecration. Blasphemy laws were abolished in England and Wales in 2008 and in Scotland in 2021. Thousands of displaced Lebanese residents in the south are returning